You know, it's a phrase we throw around today, usually about giant banks or corporations. But what about an actual empire? An empire that controlled the known world, that literally built the foundations of Western civilization. Could something that vast, that powerful, just fall apart? I mean, just think about it. For 1,000 years, first as a republic and then as an empire, Rome was the undisputed center of the world. Its legions were seen as unstoppable, its engineering was legendary, its influence was absolute, and then it collapsed. The story of its decline is a massive cautionary tale. By looking at Rome's final chaotic centuries, historians have identified these patterns. Cracks in the foundation that just grew and grew until the entire structure came crashing down. We're going to walk through 5 of the most critical signs one by one. First up, the kind of rot that starts at the top, political instability. When the very system for choosing your leaders breaks down, everything else begins to follow. For Rome, this wasn't just a rough patch. It became the new normal. The transfer of power, which should be a source of stability, turned into a complete blood sport. The throne was no longer inherited or even earned through political skill. It was seized by whichever general had the biggest army. And just look at this timeline. It really shows the chaos of this 50-year period we call the crisis of the 3rd century. It kicks off with an emperor's assassination in 235 AD, and just 3 years later, you get the year of the 6 emperors. 6 different men claimed the throne in a single year, and most of them met a violent end. It was absolute pandemonium. And get this, in that 50-year crisis, there were at least 26 official emperors. And that's not even counting the countless other guys who tried to grab power. That means the average reign was just 2 years. Being emperor of Rome became the most dangerous job in the world. All right, let's move on to our second sign, and you'll see how this builds. All that constant civil war wasn't just politically disastrous, it was bankrupting the empire. So how do you pay for all these different armies marching around fighting each other? Well, the state imposed these absolutely crushing taxes, like the annona militaris, just to fund the military. At the very same time, the wars were destroying farmland and disrupting trade. So when critical provinces like North Africa, which was basically Rome's breadbasket, were lost, it cut off vital grain and tax revenue. This just forced the government to squeeze the territories they still had even harder. It was a vicious downward spiral. This brings us right to our third sign. The sheer size of the Roman Empire, which was once its greatest strength, had become its greatest vulnerability. It was simply too big to manage and way too vast to defend. You can see the huge psychological shift right here. The early Roman Republic was all about aggressive expansion, conquering new lands for glory and resources. But the late Empire? Oh man, it was all about desperate defense. The goal wasn't to conquer anymore, but simply to hold on to what you had. The symbol of Rome became the fortress wall, not the advancing legion. So all this internal weakness, the political chaos, the empty treasury, the overstretched military, it made Rome look like a very tempting target. And now, the so-called barbarians weren't just at the gates, they were pouring over them. The sack of Rome in 410 AD was a psychological breaking point. For 800 years, the city itself had been untouchable. But as this timeline shows, after repeated sieges and failed ransom payments, the final blow actually came from within. Rebellious slaves, probably fed up with their conditions, simply opened the gates to the enemy. For 3 days, the once invincible city was looted. This quote from the scholar St. Jerome just captures the shock that rippled across the entire world. If Rome itself could fall, what was safe? It was a sign that the old order was truly and terrifyingly coming to an end. Okay, let's move to our final sign, which might be the most important of all. This one is about the cultural glue that holds a society together. And for Rome, that glue was beginning to dissolve. See, at the heart of Roman identity was this concept, the mos maiorum. It was the shared belief in tradition, in duty, and in putting the good of the state before your own personal ambition. You could think of it as the cultural software that ran the Roman hardware. But that software was getting corrupted. Ambitious generals were putting their own personal gain above the state. New religions like Christianity were challenging old Roman beliefs and the emperor's authority. People just lost faith in their institutions, from the Senate to the traditional gods. And when you add in constant plague and famine, well, you get despair, which just breaks down the bonds of civic duty. And this is really the ultimate takeaway. Rome didn't fall because of one single thing. It was a cascade failure. Political instabilities starved the economy. A weak economy couldn't support the army. A weak army couldn't defend the borders. And a society that had lost its shared values just couldn't find the collective will to save itself. You know, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And looking at the fall of Rome isn't just about understanding the past, it's a tool for thinking critically about the present. So it leaves us with a pretty profound question to consider. If these are the warning signs of a civilization in decline, what lessons should we be learning for our own?